Chapter 1 Class Awakening. All of you, this is your last awakening ceremony. If you still fail to awaken, prepare to live the rest of your life as an ordinary human and attend a normal university. You can also try to improve your cultivation in these last few months to increase your chances of entering an academy. The teacher's voice echoed across the room as several students stood before him, listening attentively, their expressions a mix of anxiety and hope. Among these students was Michael. Michael was not from this world. He had arrived in this body just 3 weeks ago, a body that coincidentally shared his name. Unlike his original world, in this one, everyone between the ages of 16 and 18 had a chance to awaken a class. More than 200 years ago, the apocalypse descended upon this world, bringing spatial rifts that spawned countless monsters and unleashed chaos. Fortunately, following the apocalypse, the world became digitized for a select few who would later be known as Awakeners. Thanks to these Awakeners, whose classes granted them incredible powers, the apocalypse ended after decades, and humanity finally reclaimed their land. When peace returned, as expected, Awakeners became figures of importance, and it became a dream for young people aged 16 to 18 to become one. However, becoming an Awakener was a privilege granted to only a few, and for this group of 18-year-old students, this was their last chance. Michael was nervous too. Though he had only been in this world for 3 weeks, he understood the significance of this ceremony. While it wasn't as though all hope would be lost if he failed to awaken, it was undeniable that no path held more promise than becoming an Awakener. Under the nervous gaze of nearly 100 students below the podium, the teacher picked up a file from the table in front of him and began to call out names. Lillian Stone. Why, yes, sir. The first student called was a young woman. Upon hearing her name, she immediately walked toward the podium, but perhaps due to her nervousness, she stumbled and fell. However, no one laughed or made fun of her. On any other occasion, they might have, but today, they weren't sure they would perform any better than the student who had fallen. The teacher, seemingly accustomed to such mishaps, waited patiently for her to get back on her feet and approach him. When she finally reached him, he wasted no time and gestured toward the transparent orb on the table. This is your 3rd time here, so you know what to do. Just place your hand on the awakening orb. If there's a reaction, it means you've successfully awakened. If there isn't, the teacher left his sentence unfinished, but it made the hearts of the students on the podium sink. Michael felt it too, though he handled it better than the others. Thanks to his mental age and the challenges he'd faced before he died from cancer in his previous life, he could keep his composure. Michael's eyes were drawn to the awakening orb on the table between the teacher and the female student. From what they had been taught in school, every Awakener, aside from gaining a class that granted them supernatural powers, also had the ability to connect their consciousness to another world, a world filled with treasures, and could quickly enhance their prowess. It was said that this world really resembled a game, though, in many ways, it was not. The awakening orb itself originated from that mysterious world. Just as the teacher had said, the girl didn't require any assistance. With a familiarity that made the corner of Michael's eyes twitch slightly, she placed both hands on the awakening orb and waited. A few seconds passed, and just as the teacher was preparing to dismiss the disappointed girl, who looked like she might burst into tears at any moment, a white light suddenly shone from the orb. Following that, a manifestation in the form of twin swords appeared on her back before disappearing. Lillian Stone has successfully awakened a class. Martial artist, the teacher announced, his voice filled with surprise, and his previously expressionless face showing clear astonishment. For this group of 18-year-olds, he hadn't expected any of them to awaken. But to think that the very first student called up would do so filled him with considerable surprise. It was well known that the best age to awaken a class was 16, as that was when the chances were highest. The older one got, the less likely awakening became. When the students heard the teacher's announcement, the previously quiet hall erupted with noise. Wow, Lillian actually awakened. First come, first served. Damn. TSK. To think the fourth to the last dumbest person in all of Class 3 would awaken. You do know that awakening successfully doesn't necessarily have anything to do with intelligence, right? Shut up. Of course. I know. Can't I just be bitter for a minute? What happened to my freedom to be negative? Like his fellow classmates, Michael was pleasantly surprised that the first student to step onto the podium had awakened. It was common knowledge that their group had almost no hope of awakening, so seeing someone succeed lifted everyone's spirits and filled them with a renewed sense of hope. However, that newly lit hope was quickly shattered. Mia Kim, awakening failed. Bruce Lean, awakening failed. Then the fourth, the fifth, all the way up to the 48th. Every student who stepped up to the podium failed to awaken, except for the first female student. The entire hall felt as silent as a graveyard, save for the quiet sobs of those who had failed their awakening. Chapter 2 Cultivation. Michael tried his best to ignore the cries of his fellow classmates around him. Failing to awaken in this world was not like failing a college exam on Earth. In the latter case, you could keep trying, and many alternatives weren't considered worse than attending college. But here, failing to awaken had no equivalent alternative. It was like a poor man, burdened with the responsibility of caring for his chronically ill parents while also supporting a younger sibling through school, betting on 3 different games with a chance to win $1 million each, and losing everything. In such a situation, breaking down and crying wouldn't be unusual. The scene around Michael now was eerily similar. Most of the students at Woodstone Public School No. 3 came from families living near or below the poverty line. For them, successfully awakening was like having $100 million land in their lap. But for these sobbing students, that distant hope of drastically changing their lives had slipped through their fingers 3 times in a row. It was no wonder that some of them broke down in tears immediately. Michael tried not to let the dark atmosphere surrounding him affect his mindset and attempted to stay positive. His situation wasn't any better than those around him, if not worse. In this world, the original owner of this body was an orphan living with his aunt, a widow with a child of her own to care for. Together, the family of 3 barely survived on the limited funds his aunt managed to earn. For Michael, successfully awakening was the fastest way to change his family's fate, but his chance of awakening was less than 1%. He couldn't help but feel a twinge of bitterness. Though he was grateful for the chance to live again, especially in a healthy body, it would be painful to live a life of mediocrity. Yet, there was nothing he could do about his slim chance of awakening. All he could do was hope for the best. Michael continued to watch as more students stepped up to the podium, only to fail in their attempts to awaken. There were only a total of 86 students in the hall, so Michael's turn was approaching quickly. Since the teacher hadn't assigned a queue and called names at random, Michael could only wait for his turn. Just when the teacher in charge of the awakenings thought that this batch of students would only produce 1 awakener, the awakening orb in front of him suddenly emitted light. The cause of the reaction was a male student standing before him. Just like the female student who had first awakened, a manifestation appeared, standard for new awakeners. The male student's body glowed red, and the staff made a fire appeared in his hands before promptly disappearing. Brian Leon has successfully awakened a class. Fire Mage, the teacher announced. As with the first awakening, an uproar erupted in the hall, but this time it was even more intense. Damn, Brian actually awakened. The heavens really aren't fair. I know, right? He's already one of the few students who managed to ignite their life seeds before the college exams, something rare even in big cities. And now he's lucky enough to awaken you. That's not all. His night breathing technique happens to align with the fire attribute, and now that he's awakened as a fire mage, the two will complement each other perfectly. F***CK. Like his classmates, Michael also had an impression of Brian. At Woodstone Public High School No. 3, Brian Leon was one of the few outstanding students who could hold his own against those from private schools with better resources, despite his humble background. His reputation extended beyond the school. He was even somewhat known throughout Woodstone City. This fame wasn't because of his academic achievements, but rather due to his exceptional talent in cultivation. The Awakening Orb wasn't the only piece of technology that Awakeners had brought back from the mysterious realm known as the Land of Origins. They introduced other technologies that significantly boosted the real world's advancement. The Land of Origins wasn't exclusive to humans. Many other civilizations of various races existed there. In fact, humans here could be considered newcomers to that world. These civilizations had already used the Land of Origins to significantly advance their own societies. Using their methods, Awakeners managed to bring something back to this world: cultivation. Cultivation offered a method for ordinary people to gain supernatural powers, although they couldn't progress as quickly as Awakeners, be as powerful as them, or enter the Land of Origins. Brian practiced the breathing technique of the night cultivation system and had considerable talent in cultivation, so even if he failed to awaken, he still had a bright future. Just as Awakeners were respected and needed in this world, cultivators were due. One was just way due at the top to be compared to anything, but the need of the two were equal. Well, according to what has been told to Michael, the world changed when the apocalypse descended. It was no longer just a planet but a realm. Planet Aurora became the Aurora realm. Some of the cracks that brought monsters into the world remained, with new ones occasionally appearing. Some were filled with monsters, while others served as passages to other realms. Awakeners were few in number, so cultivators were needed to handle these realms. Awakeners advanced society, while cultivators kept it safe. This was something that had been taught to Michael and other children from a young age. Becoming an Awakener was more desirable, though. Cultivating required resources, and they weren't cheap, with costs only increasing as one progressed. This alone had already cut off more than half of the population's ability to walk on this path. Generally, only the talented or the wealthy had a significant chance of achieving great success in cultivation. The teacher, who hadn't even smiled much when Lillian Stone awakened, now had a wide grin as he addressed Brian. "Come stand here and wait," he said, pointing to the spot beside him where Lillian Stone also stood. He was thrilled that a genius from the school had just become even more exceptional, a super genius. After settling that, the teacher continued with the awakening ceremony, but he was met with disappointment as no other student managed to awaken, not even those with talent in cultivation. This wasn't unexpected. Just because a student had talent in cultivation didn't mean they would awaken a class, especially not at the age of 18. However, the teacher remained quite pleased, as the school now had two more Awakeners to its name. The awakening ceremony continued, and soon it was time for the 80th student to step up to the podium: Michael. Michael Norman. "Yes, sir." Hearing his name called, Michael nervously made his way up to the podium. Since the previous owner of this body didn't have much presence at school, he didn't have anyone cheering for him. Soon, Michael reached the podium, and under the teacher's guidance, he placed his hands, now unknowingly sweating, on the awakening orb, filled with anticipation. Chapter 3: Successful Awakening. Seconds ticked by, and Michael could almost hear his own heartbeat pounding in his chest. Each student was allocated 30 seconds with the awakening orb. Any more time was pointless, as it had been proven over the years. 10 seconds passed. 15 seconds. 20 seconds. 25 seconds. Just as the teacher prepared to dismiss Michael, whose heart had already sunk into bitterness, the awakening orb under Michael's hand suddenly emitted a bright light. Instantly, Michael felt a warm sensation coursing through his body. His mind seemed to clear, and a surge of strength flowed through him. The manifestation that accompanied every new awakener soon appeared. A black, gloomy energy swirled around Michael, coating his body, while a dark staff briefly materialized in his hand before everything vanished. Michael was momentarily stunned by the sudden turn of events, but the voice of the equally surprised teacher brought him back to reality. Michael Norman has successfully awakened a class. Necromancer, the teacher announced. Another one. Necromancer, huh? That sounds powerful and maybe a little bit evil. Be more confident in your speech, brother. It's evil as fuck. Yeah, but as long as I can awaken a class, I wouldn't even mind if it involved selling my body. Just say you're horny, bro. As before, an uproar erupted in the hall, but it was more subdued than the previous two times. It couldn't be helped. Unlike the excitement over Lillian Stone's unexpected awakening or the amazement at Brian Leon's transformation into a super genius, Michael didn't have much of a presence in the school. But that wasn't the case anymore. Also, only a few of his classmates from Class 3, Section N8 were in the hall, and he recognized even fewer of them. He didn't personally know any of them. Good, 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 the teacher in charge of the ceremony said, repeating the word 3 times in delight. It wasn't that he knew Michael personally, but rather because a ceremony he had expected to yield no awakeners had surprisingly produced 3. If none had awakened, he wouldn't have been surprised. Such outcomes were common. Come stand beside me and wait. The teacher gestured for Michael to join the other 2 awakeners. Yes, teacher. Michael nodded, still in a daze, and compiled. Seeing a new comrade, Lillian and Brian both gave him a nod of acknowledgement, which Michael returned. In truth, Michael's attention was no longer fully on his surroundings. He could catch bits of what his classmates whispered about him, but he was too preoccupied to care. His attention was on what had just appeared before his eyes. A blue, transparent panel floated in front of Michael. Dash. A name, Michael Norman. Race, human. Class, Necromancer Apprentice. A level, 1. EXP, 0/100. A strength, 1.3. A agility, 1.4. Constitution, 1.2. A intelligence, 4.5. A attribute points, 0. A skills, undead summoning, undead revival. Talent, infinite evolution. Class skill, contract slot, 0/2. Gift, mark of origin. Michael's mind wasn't focused on the details displayed on the panel. It was only now that he fully grasped what had just happened. He had awakened. He had really awakened. A surge of happiness rushed through him, and his tense shoulders finally relaxed. While this was only the beginning, the most important thing was that he had awakened. No matter what came next, his future now held new possibilities. Michael let out a deep sigh of relief and turned his attention back to the rest of the awakening ceremony. Only 6 students remained, and in about 4 minutes, the ceremony would conclude. Each student would soon return home, left to ponder their future based on the outcome of their awakening. Now that he no longer felt nervous, Michael's mind was free to think of other things. The most important realization was that he had awakened a class, the Necromancer class. In truth, Michael knew little about awakeners and their classes beyond what he had learned in school and from hearsay. What he did know was that classes were generally categorized into 3 types: combat, support, and lifestyle. His Necromancer class seemed like a mix of both combat and support, but Michael wasn't entirely sure. Aside from the Knight and Mage classes that were so influential in this world, he knew little about other classes. The school only taught general knowledge about Awakeners, without going into much depth. Perhaps the higher-ups felt that students who were unlikely to awaken didn't need to know more and could better use their time studying or cultivating. It's also said that if one cultivated before awakening and had talent in it, they could activate a secondary class, so cultivation was seen as a good thing overall. Michael wasn't sure if limited information was unique to Woodstone Public High School No. 3, but he did know one thing for certain. There was no discrimination between classes. There was no such thing as an overly weak class, as all classes theoretically had no limits. Power depended on the Awakeners themselves. According to the teachers, this even applied to lifestyle classes like tailors. Michael wasn't sure how true this was, but he figured he'd find out soon enough. After all, he was now an Awakener, someone who should be valued by the government. Just as Michael sorted out his thoughts and was about to check the panel that had appeared in his mind earlier, the voice of the teacher in charge of the awakening ceremony caught his attention. Okay, that's it for today. For those of you who failed to awaken, remember that failing to become an awakener doesn't mean your futures are bleak. During the early days of the apocalypse, at least half of our ancestors who played a crucial role in our survival and advancement were ordinary people. So what if you didn't awaken? The sad students below the podium heard this, and a wave of motivation surged through them. Even Michael couldn't help but be impressed by the teacher's words. However, he knew that once they left the hall, the harsh reality would soon catch up to them. Perhaps some of the students already understood this, but they needed something to make them feel better at the moment. One must know that while this world was technically more advanced than Michael's previous one, it wasn't all sunshine for the average person. For example, bankers had long become a thing of the past, along with many other jobs. Only a few establishments still employed people for tasks that machines could do, either because they were cheaper or wanted to be classy, like some upscale hotels. Most people in this world live in poverty, barely scraping by with the few jobs available to them. It was only after arriving in this world that Michael truly understood a saying from his old life: technology can be both a blessing and a curse. This desperation to escape their current circumstances was one of the reasons why these students so desperately wanted to become awakeners. If Michael hadn't awakened, he would have been on the receiving end of the teacher's encouragement too. He knew he was truly lucky. Seeing that his words had resonated with the students, the teacher nodded slightly in satisfaction before speaking again. The college exams for both regular colleges and cultivation academies are in 3 months, so make sure to prepare seriously during this time. Just because you don't need to come to school again after today doesn't mean you should slack off. Okay. Yes, sir. The students, including Michael and the 2 other new awakeners, responded loudly. All right, you were dismissed. Chapter 4: Meeting the Principal. The moment the teacher in charge of the awakening ceremony left the hall with Michael and the 2 other new awakeners, they encountered the teachers, a male and a female, on their way to the principal's office. Following the male teacher was a young girl, who seemed to be around 17 or 18 years old. Behind the female teacher were 5 younger-looking students, 2 boys and 3 girls. From the brief conversation between the 3 teachers, Michael learned that the students accompanying them had successfully awakened as well. The girl following the male teacher was also from Class 3, though Michael didn't recognize her. That wasn't surprising. After all, Woodstone was a public school with over 600 students in Class 3 alone. There were 9 sections in Class 3, each with up to 100 students max per teacher, although the classes rarely reached full capacity. Since that would make even the large classrooms feel cramped, there were usually no fewer than 60 students per class. As for the 5 students behind the female teacher, they were from Class 1. Michael had guessed this due to their younger appearance, but he was still shocked by the number of awakeners in that class. In fact, he was surprised by how many students had successfully awakened this year in general, including the students from Class 3. A total of 9 students had awakened. While this might seem small compared to Woodstone's overall student population, it was actually significant. Even Class 1, which consisted of 16-year-olds, the age group most likely to awaken, rarely had this many, 4, Awakeners in a single year. In all the years Michael had been in senior high, the total number of students who had successfully awakened, from his time in Class 1 through Class 3, including the older students, barely exceeded 12. And most of those Awakeners had been from Class 1. This year, not a single student from Class 2, where most students were 17 years old, had awakened. Therefore, the number of Awakeners at Woodstone Public High School this year was unusually high, and Class 3's success, in particular, was downright abnormal for reasons unknown. As Michael mused over his thoughts, they soon reached the principal's office. Upon reaching the door, the only female teacher among them took the initiative to knock. "Principal," she called out. "Come in," a voice responded from within the office. With permission granted, the female teacher took the lead and entered the room. Inside, a middle-aged man sat behind a desk. Michael recognized him. He was the principal of Woodstone Public High School No. 3 Michael. It was rumored that he was a powerful knight, though Michael wasn't sure, as he had never seen the man in action. Setting aside the document he had been focused on, Principal Mike turned to smile at the newcomers. 9 Awakeners this year. Heavens must really favor our school, the principal remarked, pleasantly surprised by the number of students in his office. It was customary for new Awakeners to meet with the principal alongside their teachers, so he was confident he hadn't made a mistake. Seeing no one contradict his statement, he knew his assumption was correct. With this confirmation, the smile on Principal Mike's face grew even brighter. "I believe your teachers have already informed you why you're here, yes?" Principal Mike asked, glancing at Michael and the other students in his office. "Yes, sir," they replied in unison. "Haha, there's no need to be nervous. What I'm about to tell you is probably something you already know, but I'll still say it," the principal said with a light chuckle. Michael and the other students subconsciously straightened their backs. The principal paid no mind to this and continued. "As you know, as Awakeners, your life and future are now different from those of ordinary people. Power and wealth are within your grasp, if you're wise enough to seize them. If you had failed to awaken, you would be preparing to enter an ordinary university to further your education. If you had decent talent in cultivation, you'd try to enter a cultivation academy. But you all have successfully awakened. So instead of attending a cultivation academy or an ordinary university, you'll be going to an awakened university, where you learn everything you need to know about being an awakener. You might think that going to an academy is unnecessary, since you could just enter the land of origin on your own, like our ancestors, and make things work. While that's possible, anyone with good sense wouldn't do that. Why make things harder for yourself? So, right now, aside from entering the land of origin, which you'll soon have access to, getting into an Awakener Academy should be your next main focus. As for learning more about your new identity as an Awakener, you'll need to visit the Supers Association to register after this. The association will provide you with better information that you currently need." The principal then went on to mention a few other points. Some of these, Michael and the others already knew, while others provided new insights. After saying what he needed to, Principal Mike dismissed the students and teachers, asking Brian to stay behind. After being dismissed from the principal's office, the teacher responsible for overseeing Michael's awakening spoke up. "As new Awakeners, you must register with the Supers Association within 3 days. Failing to do so is considered a crime. Though you have some time, I recommend you register immediately if you are free today." As the principal mentioned, you also need to take the upcoming college exams seriously. Just because you're Awakeners doesn't exempt you from academic testing. While it may not be as strict as for regular university students due to your status, it's still important depending on the academy you plan to attend. Anyway, the Supers Association will have more details on this, so make sure you register quickly. For those who aren't in their third year, the teacher addressed the students from Class 1. You can also attempt the college exams if you think you're up for it, as the Federation and most academies do not oppose it. However, most Awakeners who manage to awaken before their third year prefer to take home lessons while honing their skills as Awakeners, aiming for a higher score when they are ready to enter the academy. After offering this advice, and with the other teachers sharing their own, they left the 9 students and returned to the teacher's office. There was no need to flatter the new Awakeners. These were no longer the apocalyptic days. Although the teachers were softer with them compared to before, it wasn't to the point of bowing at their feet, but they certainly didn't want to offend them either. With the rise of cultivation, Awakeners were no longer the only powerful people in the world. Ordinary individuals could reach similar levels of strength, though Awakeners were a rarer breed. Veteran teachers like these knew that leaving a good impression was enough, as they had no hidden agendas. As the students made their way out of the hall, the teacher turned to Michael, Lillian, and Brian. With a smile, he said, "You 3, follow me to the principal's office." Chapter 5, Registering as an Awakener. 1. The students felt a little lost after the teachers left, but not Michael. He already knew what he needed to do next. The most important task was to register at the Supers Association, and the second was to inform his aunt about his awakening. Michael was already familiar with the Supers Association. Even before he transmigrated into this world, the original owner of his body had a basic understanding of it. This was common knowledge among the natives. The Supers Association was an organization under the Federation, the new government established after the apocalypse. The world now had only one ruling authority, the Federation, under which were countries, states, and cities. The Supers Association managed all supernatural beings in the Aurora realm. Ordinary humans had to be a rank 1 cultivator before they could register, whereas Awakeners were required to register immediately upon awakening, as they became supernatural beings the moment they awakened. The purpose of the Supers Association was to protect the general public, manage supernatural beings, and provide them with various benefits. Michael made his way out of the school compound. As soon as he stepped outside, he hailed an empty taxi that happened to be passing by. "To the Supers Association," he said. "That'll be $1, the driver replied. "Okay." The Supers Association was a little far from Woodstone Public School. On foot, it would take Michael about 35 minutes, but by taxi, it would take no more than 20. Settling into the passenger seat, Michael pulled his phone from his pocket. Normally, if the school were still in session, it would have been in his backpack, but with the college exams approaching and no real need to attend classes, everything aside from his school uniform was casual today. Every senior high student who came to school today did so primarily for the awakening ceremony. After today, the school would feel noticeably emptier. Though the technology in this world was more advanced than Earth's, familiar technologies still existed. The rich used floating cars, while the less well-off relied on vehicles with wheels. The wealthy had watches that projected holographic displays as substitutes for phones, while others were content with traditional phones. The world was a mix of old and new technology, but somehow it all blended into a strange yet harmonious system that didn't seem out of place. Michael decided to text his aunt instead of calling her. She worked as a cook at a relatively upscale restaurant, so she was likely still busy. Michael sent a short message saying he had succeeded in his awakening. Just as he was about to put his phone aside, an incoming call flashed on the screen. It was his aunt. Michael immediately answered the call. "Aunt, aren't you at work?" Michael immediately inquired. It was rare for his aunt to answer so quickly, even on her days off. "I'm still at work." I just happened to be on a short break when your message came in, his aunt, Aunt Mia, replied. Michael believed her, as he could hear the noise in the background. Mike, his aunt called out, her tone hesitant as if she wanted to say something but was unsure. Ma. Michael smiled, already guessing what was on her mind. He understood her disbelief. Most parents were shocked when their children awakened on their first try, let alone Michael, who had even less of a chance. Your message, Aunt Mia began slowly, pausing before continuing. Is it true? It is, Aunt Mia. Today's my lucky day. Haha, Michael chuckled in response. Aunt Mia let out a small squeak of joy, clearly trying to contain her excitement. Knowing she was still at work, Michael decided to end the conversation so she could get back to her duties. I'm on my way to the Supers Association, Aunt. I'll talk to you when you get home. Okay. I'll transfer some money to you now. Get yourself something to eat and save a little for Lily when she gets back from school. I might be home a little late today. Yes, Aunt. After exchanging a few more words, they ended the call. Michael let out a sigh as happiness surged through him. Though he was originally from Earth, he had fully embraced his role as Michael in this world and cared deeply for his family here. Perhaps it had something to do with losing his parents early in life back on Earth. In a way, both Michaels had experienced particularly difficult childhoods. After ending the call, Michael closed his eyes to rest, ignoring the driver's gaze, who seemed like he had something to ask. Only now did he realize how tense he had been in the awakening hall, leaving his spirit weary. It had only been a few minutes since Michael decided to rest when he felt a nudge from the driver. We're here, the driver said. Michael weakly opened his eyes, still a bit dazed. But when he saw the two-story building not far from him, his mind cleared, and he quickly sat up. Your code, please, Michael requested. Here, the driver compiled, showing Michael a code on his phone, which Michael then scanned with his own phone, transferring the fare to the driver's account. Thanks for the ride, Michael said. No problem. Congratulations on your awakening, by the way. Watching the driver drive away and hearing his last words, a smile appeared on Michael's face. If the driver wasn't certain when he overheard the conversation with Michael's aunt earlier, he would be now, having seen how focused Michael was on the Supers Association branch as he got out of the car. Michael shook his head and refocused. Taking a deep breath, he made his way toward the entrance of the Supers Association. Chapter 6, Registering as an Awakener. 2. The inside of the Supers Association branch was a bit noisy, which surprised Michael greatly. Outside, he hadn't heard much sound, so he expected the building to be quiet, but it wasn't. There were actually quite a lot of people, most of them appearing very young. Michael didn't need to think much to realize that these people were probably new Awakeners, just like him. With only 2 Supers Association branches in Woodstone City, it wasn't surprising to see many Awakeners despite their rarity. Since all schools nationwide had chosen today for the awakening ceremony this year, most of the young people in the Supers Association building were likely the new Awakeners from Woodstone City. After today, the number of new Awakeners registering over the next 2 days should be low. Michael glanced around, and a rough count suggested there were at least 30 students present. This was quite a number, considering they all came from the 9 public and private schools in Woodstone City. As he took in his surroundings, Michael lined up behind one of the shorter queues leading to the reception table. He wasn't sure what to expect when he reached the front, but seeing others his age, likely fellow new Awakeners, gave him some idea. Fortunately, Michael didn't have to wait long. 28 minutes later, he was near the front, with only one person ahead of him. Behind him, more people had joined the line. As Michael waited, he felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a new message. $300 has been transferred to your account 27********78 XXXX Bank International. from Mia Grace. Your current account balance is $461. $300. That's quite a lot. Michael felt a little uncomfortable seeing how much his aunt had sent. Aunt Mia's monthly salary was only about $3,000, excluding occasional bonuses, and she had just transferred a tenth of it. Considering it was mid-June and Mia's salary typically arrived at the beginning of the month, this $300 could very well be a quarter of what she had left. Even back on Earth, $3,000 wasn't much for a family to live on. The $161 balance he had before was what remained from the $300 monthly allowance Aunt Mia gave him. Though Michael was concerned, he couldn't help but feel a warm sensation in his chest. He was truly loved in this world, something he had rarely felt back on Earth, where he had even faced his battle with cancer alone, with no one to care for him. As he thought of his family, Michael secretly clenched his fist, silently vowing once again to change their lives and take care of them. However, a wave of uncertainty washed over him. Is becoming an awakener truly life-changing for the average person? To be honest, everyone had been raised to believe that becoming an awakener was a one-way ticket to the top. But beyond the power it brought, the exact reasons and ways it transformed a life remained a mystery to most. It was common knowledge that power brought wealth, though Michael, who had barely lived his adult years, was well aware of this. As various thoughts flashed through his mind, it was soon Michael's turn at the reception table. "Good day, sir. What can I do for you?" the lady behind the counter asked. She seemed to be in her late 20s and wore a professional smile. Her calm demeanor eased Michael's troubled mind a little, allowing him to reply calmly, "I'm here to register." "As?" the lady inquired, glancing down at his school uniform. Usually, there were only two types of students who came to register: new awakeners or those talented enough to reach rank 1 as cultivators while still in school. Today was the National Awakening Ceremony Day, but she didn't want to jump to conclusions. "Yes, I'm here to register as an awakener," Michael confirmed. "Oh, I see," the lady replied, not appearing surprised by his response. After confirming his purpose, she began asking Michael a few questions. Most were about his personal details, like his name, age, and address. She even asked for his bank account number for some reason, which Michael provided without hesitation. Thankfully, the process was quick and surprisingly straightforward. "Aren't you going to ask about my class?" Michael asked, curious. "There's no need for that, Mr. Michael. Your school will provide that information to us," the lady replied in her signature smile. "Ah, I see," Michael said, understanding now. "I thought she might have forgotten to ask, but it makes sense. Even if the Supers Association had a way to verify one's class, doing it for every new registrant would take too much time." After pressing his fingerprint on a tool the lady provided and signing his name on a freshly printed document, she addressed him again, this time in a more formal tone. "Congratulations on your awakening, Mr. Michael. As of today, you are now a proud warrior of the Federation, the people, and the Aurora realm. As a new awakener of the Federation, a set of military cultivation techniques and martial techniques will be sent to your email. A link to a specially designed platform for supernaturals will also be provided. The password is your full name written in all caps, followed by this year's number, 228, with no spaces in between. Also, as a new awakener, you are eligible for a monthly payment of $15,000. This amount will be reduced by half if you fail to reach rank 1 within 6 months and will be revoked if you fail to become a rank 2 awakener within a year. Of course, the monthly payment will also increase alongside your advancement." Michael was a little overwhelmed by the sudden information dump, but one thing immediately caught his attention: money. It wasn't just the money. Other benefits came with it too. Though the conditions seemed strict, it didn't change the fact that he was soon going to have a significant income. Michael's heart quickened a little, but before he could sink deeper into his thoughts, the lady behind the counter spoke again. "Is there anything else you'd like to ask about, Mr. Michael?" He was about to reflexively say no, since he had grasped most of what she said when he remembered something. Feeling suddenly bashful, with a red face, he inquired in a low tone, "When will the monthly benefit arrive, miss?" "Ah." The lady was visibly taken aback, but after regaining her composure, her smile grew even brighter, and it seemed she was struggling to hold back a laugh. Her reaction made Michael feel even more embarrassed, but thankfully, she didn't dwell on it. "It should arrive within an hour at most, sir," she replied. Michael nodded slightly, thanking the woman behind the counter before quickly making his way out of the Supers Association building. Though he didn't regret asking about the money, he couldn't help but feel a little self-conscious, worried it might have come across as if he cared more about the money than anything else, though, in truth, he kind of did. Anyway, with this, the house shouldn't be low on funds in a few months. Aunt won't have to work so hard anymore, and she and Lily can take better care of themselves now. Michael was filled with joy, but he didn't let his happiness blind him. He knew nothing came free in this world. Even as an awakener, the Federation wouldn't just hand out money without expecting something in return. Though it seems complicated, according to that lady, all I have to do to retain the benefits, and even improve them, is to get stronger. Michael had a clear goal now, to increase his strength quickly and make life better for himself and his family. Successfully awakening was just the beginning. But before anything else, he needed to get home and study more about Awakeners once the Supers Association sent him the information. Chapter 7: Information about Awakeners and the Land of Origin. 1. The journey back home required Michael to take another taxi, which he didn't hesitate to pay for. Though he felt his body had gotten stronger since his awakening, it didn't mean he had to push himself unnecessarily. His home was nowhere close to the Supers Association. From his school to his house was a 30-minute walk, and with the Supers Association's location added in, it would take him at least an hour and a half to get home. Now that he had money in his account and was soon going to receive much more, Michael didn't see any reason to be frugal. While in the taxi, he sent his aunt a message letting her know he was done registering at the Supers Association and was on his way home. It was also around this time that a bank notification arrived, informing him that $15,000 had been transferred to his account. I'm rich. I'm rich. Though Michael had seen larger sums in his previous life, it was easy to forget that he was currently playing the role of an 18-year-old, something he had fully embraced. Unlike earlier, when Aunt Mia had responded immediately, there was no quick reply this time, which didn't surprise Michael. He had considered sending Aunt Mia a portion of the money he received, but knowing her, she would probably panic and it might affect her work. Since there was no need to rush, he decided to wait until she got back home. Michael didn't have the taxi drop him directly at his house but rather at a mall near the community where his house was located. He hadn't forgotten his aunt's request to buy something for himself and his cousin, though he decided to use the money he received from the government instead of the amount she had given him. When his aunt returned later in the evening, he planned to return her money, along with extra. By the time Michael left the mall, he was carrying several bags. This round of shopping had cost him about $500. It might seem excessive to spend money like this, but Michael didn't regret it. For now, it was time for his family to enjoy life a little more. After all, what was the point of having money if not to spend it on oneself and loved ones? Of course, Michael had a limit to how much he would spend. He didn't know much yet, but he suspected that the government didn't provide benefits to new Awakeners purely out of goodwill. He had a feeling that part of the money was meant to be a resource for growth. There's no need to overthink it. I'll understand better once I check the emails from the Supers Association. By the time Michael finally got home, The sun had already set. The awakening ceremony had been held at 12:30 in the afternoon, and now it was a little past 4 p.m. Lily will be back from school soon. Let me use this time to get things in order. And Michael did just that. He put the food products in their respective places and organized the rest of his purchases accordingly. I'm so tired. By the time Michael was done, he was famished. He had only had a light breakfast that morning, so he decided to cook something for himself using some of the ingredients he had bought from the mall. Meat was on the menu, too. Thanks to living with an aunt who was a chef, Michael's cooking skills weren't bad at all. He made rice and fried meat, and just as he finished, his cousin, Lily, arrived home. Lily, like her mom, had black hair, blue eyes, and a short stature. Michael, on the other hand, stood out in their family with his blonde hair, green eyes, and tall build. It wasn't surprising to the family of three, as they knew he wasn't an immediate relative, but it often puzzled outsiders who assumed they were directly related, at least until they heard their different surnames. "Good evening, Brother Michael," Lily greeted as she poked her head through the kitchen door. "What are you cooking? Is that meat? It smells so good." Watching his cousin drool, Michael smiled helplessly. "Go wash up first before you think of eating. I'll serve you a plate in the meantime." "Okay, Brother Michael." The foodie immediately turned to leave without saying anything else. However, she came back a few seconds later and stared at Michael hesitantly. "What happened?" Michael asked, confused. "Brother Michael," Lily began, her hands behind her back and her head lowered. "How was the awakening ceremony?" So that's what this is about." Michael sighed at how similar the mother-daughter duo was. They didn't want to hurt his feelings, yet they didn't pretend to ignore them. Lily heard Michael sigh and thought it was because he had failed to awaken. "Don't be too sad, Brother Michael. Even if you fail to awaken, it's not like the world has ended. I believe you can also become a powerful cultivator and enter those mysterious realms, even if you can't access the land of origin. The future is still bright." Michael was speechless when he heard this. When did I say I failed to awaken? What's going on in this 15-year-old's mind? However, soon Michael burst into laughter, clearly amused. Lily was stunned when she saw Michael laugh until tears formed in his eyes. She wondered if he had gone mad from sadness. Maybe that explained why he had been so unusually calm earlier. Michael couldn't bear to see the increasingly worried look on his cousin's face, so he addressed her. "Who said I failed to awaken? Silly. Why do you think we're having meat if there wasn't a special occasion?" Michael then gave her a brief summary of the events that happened that afternoon. He didn't go into much detail about the Supers Association, but did mention the money. "Wow, Brother Michael, you are rich. What are you thinking? Stop looking at me like that. Brother Michael, Tilda. Hey. Give me some money, Tilda." Michael spent some time getting his sister's focus off his account balance with a few promises. Watching her hum and skip away in happiness, a gentle smile appeared on his face. Though it seemed like she was more excited about the money, he knew she was genuinely happy about his successful awakening. Michael took a deep breath and steeled himself before carrying a plate of food to his room. He had delayed for long enough. It was time to finally learn more about this awakening business. Chapter 8: Information about Awakeners and the Land of Origin. 2. Michael's family lived in a rented two-bedroom apartment on the second floor of a 6-story building, with 4 apartments on each floor. The living conditions and environment could be described as possible. Michael figured that once he had more money in the future, he would move his family to a better place. The young man was filled with dreams and plans for the future. Among the 2 bedrooms, one belonged to Michael, while the other was shared by his cousin and aunt. Michael always felt guilty about this arrangement, and this feeling carried over after his transmigration. Regardless of whatever ties they shared, it didn't change the fact that he wasn't their immediate family member. But perhaps it was like a saying he had heard on Earth: family isn't decided by blood. After entering his relatively empty room, Michael sat on a chair next to a desk filled with books and placed his plate on the table. Taking a mouthful of rice with his spoon, he brought out his phone and opened his email. There, he found several messages from the Supers Association. The first message he saw was a congratulatory note on his awakening, with a file containing the set of military standard cultivation techniques that the lady at the counter had mentioned. The file contained a breathing technique that had no specific attribute, and a meditative technique that was purely aimed at increasing his mana pool, also without any elemental attribute. Michael knew what breathing and meditative techniques were. After all, he had also practiced the free breathing technique provided by the Federation to its citizens, though he had no noticeable talent for cultivation. However, this was where his confusion began. Though Michael had not yet taken the time to study the panel in his mind, he knew he wasn't mistaken when he saw a level-up system there. One piece of information he knew about Awakeners was that they could level up in the land of origin. This was why Awakeners grew stronger more quickly, and the land of origin was often said to resemble a game. So this begged the question: since he could level up, why bother cultivating? Though there were rumors that cultivation could grant someone a second class, none of the teachers in school dared to confirm it. Thankfully, there was a note in the file that soon cleared up Michael's confusion. So that's what it is. After reading the note in the file, Michael realized that just because Awakeners could level up, which in turn made them stronger, didn't mean that cultivating was useless to them. What happens when one can't level up in the short term and still wants to grow stronger? Cultivation could help fill that gap. It turned out that, aside from leveling up, Awakeners could actively enhance their strength through other means. The two techniques sent by the Supers Association belonged to the Night Cultivation System and the Mage Cultivation System, respectively. Michael was more familiar with the former than the latter. It was said that the cultivation systems and methods originated from the land of origin. For the Night Cultivation System, one had to push their human body to its theoretical limit and light up a life seed within them to step onto the path of the supernatural, but this was no easy task. The theoretical limit of a human body was twice the strength and capabilities of an average human. Even good athletes were typically only about half as strong as this threshold. To become a rank 1 knight, a person needed to push their body to twice the capabilities of an average human. This was very difficult to achieve under normal circumstances, but with a breathing technique, one could use it as a catalyst to reach their human limit. After lighting up a life seed, they would gain a new upper limit and could continue to polish their life seed, thereby continually increasing their body's limits and becoming stronger. This method was primarily for ordinary humans, but Awakeners could also use breathing techniques to enhance their physical strength. The difference, however, was that they couldn't light up a life seed since, as Awakeners, they no longer had limits. However, the note in the file revealed something that surprised Michael: the existence of dual classes. According to the note, if one could light up a life seed before they awakened, as long as there was no conflict with the class they eventually awakened into and it wasn't the same, there was a high chance of acquiring a secondary class. This potential applied specifically to the Night Cultivation System, which could awaken a secondary class, the Night class. Michael didn't know much about the Mage system, and the note didn't elaborate on it. No wonder the principal and teachers kept mentioning that after registering with the Supers Association, we'd eventually learn what we needed to know. And this isn't even the only email I received. There's still that mysterious supernatural platform. Michael suddenly felt enlightened. Things that had been unclear to him before now made much more sense. The note that came with the techniques was really helpful. Unfortunately, he hadn't managed to become a knight before awakening, so he missed out on the chance for a dual class. Is this why the principal specifically told Brian to stay back? I don't know much about dual classes, but if one class can make someone stronger, it makes sense that having two would be even better. If that's the case, then Brian is indeed special, even among Awakeners. Michael didn't feel envious of this, though. He wasn't in competition with anyone. He was already happy just to have been fortunate enough to awaken. Michael continued to read through the note, and once he finished, he closed it. There was no need to rush into cultivation. He still had something else to do. Feeling excited, Michael turned to the other email sent by the Supers Association. This email contained a link, which, according to the lady who attended to him at the Supers Association, was his access to a platform made for all registered supernatural beings within the Federation. Without hesitation, Michael tapped the link, which led him to a browser page with a simple design. Chapter 9: Information about Awakeners and the Land of Origin. 3. The page was simple, with a white background, the Supers Association's logo, and two empty bars for inputting an email and password. There wasn't anything particularly interesting to observe on this page, so Michael quickly entered his email and password according to the instructions given by the lady at the Supers Association. He felt a sense of anticipation. After all, this was a platform exclusively for supernatural beings, something he never could have imagined accessing in both his lives. Somehow, it feels like I've been invited into a secret organization. After inputting his details, Michael signed in. Soon, he was taken to a new page. Unlike the somewhat bland appearance of the login page, this one was more vibrant and lively. It looked like a forum. A lot seemed to be happening, but unfortunately, there wasn't any instruction manual. Not that one was needed. At first glance, the Supers Association forum didn't seem too different from a regular forum, aside from its content. Does anyone know the weakness of a swamp wyvern? Why? Seems like we have a big shot in the house. Fr. If I recall correctly, wyverns are usually above level 30, right? That's a teenage wyvern, not exactly strong. It's a nonchalance of subtly calling a wyvern weak for me. Newbie cultivator here. How strong is a wyvern for us cultivators? A level 30 should be a commanding beast for you guys. So yeah, you'll need a knight commander or mage commander to take on a wyvern. Dude, just say a rank 3 cultivator. It's not my fault, brother. Awakeners and cultivators' power systems can be confusing at times. That was the kind of content in the forum. Michael could only read and all, unable to fully grasp most of it. Once again, the Supers Association delivered essential information right to his fingertips, not in the form of step-by-step guidance, but through an interactive platform. Since it was a forum, Michael could search for whatever information he needed or ask directly, which he did without hesitation. Though some of the posts on the homepage had intriguing titles, Michael stayed focused. Reading random posts wouldn't help him. He couldn't even understand much of what they discussed yet. Michael dove into a spree of information seeking, and the gaps in his understanding slowly began to fill. By the time he was done, it had already grown dark outside, but he hardly noticed. Reading through various posts on the forum had opened Michael's eyes wide. What shocked him most was the sheer power hidden within this world. We've always heard about cultivators and awakeners, but aside from a few basics about cultivators, like life seeds and the ranks that follow, everything else is shrouded in mystery. Information about awakeners is even more elusive. Michael felt a mix of shock, enlightenment, and excitement. It's my fault for underestimating the people of this world. In fact, it wasn't just Michael who had these misconceptions. Even the original citizens of this world felt similarly. After all, it had only been a little over 200 years since Aurora first came into contact with Mena. How advanced could their civilization have become in such a short time? However, they were all wrong, very wrong. The truly powerful beings of this world were astonishingly strong. For example, Michael finally learned more about the power system of cultivators. There were 7 ranks in total, from rank 1 to 7, known respectively as Apprentice, Elite, Commander, Master, King, Emperor, and Demigod. Yes, Demigod. At first, Michael thought he had misread, but after checking 3 times and even watching a video of a demigod effortlessly defeating a 100-meter-tall monster with a casual slap, he was left speechless. He didn't know exactly how strong that monster was, but he was certain that a mere sneeze from it would have been enough to end his life. Even if such powerful beings were rare, they should not be few. If they were, the Federation and the Supers Association would likely have kept information about them under tight wraps. The Supers Association forum truly expanded Michael's perspective, and he found himself exhilarated by what he had learned. Power, power. I must have it. If before, becoming an Awakener was mainly about improving his and his family's life, with living a fulfilling life as a secondary goal, now Michael's heart burned with a fierce desire for power. It took a while for Michael to calm down from the surge of excitement. He had also learned a lot about Awakeners, particularly regarding the mysterious Land of Origin. The Land of Origin was a mystical realm that only Awakeners could access. It was said to resemble a game world, complete with levels, quests, and more. But one should never mistake it for a game, or they would come to regret it deeply. What linked the Land of Origin to an Awakener was the Mark of Origin. Michael glanced down at the back of his right hand, where a flower-like tattoo lay. This hadn't been there before. Michael had never gotten a tattoo. It only appeared after his awakening, this mysterious tattoo, following him ever since. The mark would only show if he wanted it to. Our name, Michael Norman. Race, human. Class, Necromancer Apprentice. Our level, 1. Key XP, 0 by 100. Our strength, 1.3. A agility, 1.4. Constitution, 1.2. A intelligence, 4.5. A attribute points, 0. A skills, undead summoning, undead revival. Talent, infinite evolution. Class skill, contract slot, 0 by 2. Gift, Mark of Origin. The Mark of Origin had 2 primary functions. First, it served as a key to connect an Awakener's consciousness with the Land of Origin. Second, it acted as a miniature spatial space. Yes, like a spatial storage ring. Michael had already checked off one of the must-haves on any transmigrator's list with this discovery. However, Michael was curious about what a gift meant, as his Mark of Origin was labeled as 1. Yet, he couldn't find any information about it in the forum. This seemed implausible. Surely, all the Awakeners in the Supers Association would be interested in this topic. So, there could only be one explanation. The information was restricted. It likely meant he wasn't yet authorized to access such knowledge. Michael felt he was on the right track with his guess, especially since, right next to the profile they created for him, Level 1 member, was clearly displayed in bold. This only made Michael more curious about what a gift was. If information about demigods could be accessed by a Level 1 member like him, even if it wasn't particularly in-depth, then the fact that details about gifts were hidden suggested that this subject was considered more important than even a demigod. Perhaps it held the same weight as matters concerning a god. Though the forum didn't have any direct mentions of gods, Michael couldn't help but suspect that they might exist in this world. It was only after exploring the forum that he realized just how deep the mysteries of this world ran. Fortunately, he could still investigate other information about the panel in his head, turning his attention to the next most intriguing aspect, his talent. According to what he found on the forum, talents could be seen as innate skills that could be used without the need for mana. They were akin to high-level skills, except that they were rare, even among Awakeners. There were two ways Awakeners could obtain a talent. One was through pure luck during the awakening ceremony, and the other was by seizing certain opportunities in the land of origin. It was clear that something extraordinary had landed in Michael's lap. However, he felt that his talent was a bit peculiar. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Evolution points: 1, 16 hours, 9 minutes, 23 seconds. Aside from the fact that something called evolution points would appear and accumulate every 24 hours, this talent seemed to be currently useless. Despite this, Michael was still pleased to have a talent. Even though he didn't understand its use yet, he was confident it would prove valuable in the future. From its name, Infinite Evolution, he held high expectations for what it might become. Chapter 10: Preparations. Michael also read a few things about classes and races, and he had something to say to his teacher, who had claimed, "There's no discrimination between classes." Bullshit. In reality, there wasn't any outright discrimination against classes from what Michael could see. However, unlike how his teacher had portrayed it, there was indeed a clear division between classes. There are no weak classes, only weak awakeners was a phrase Michael frequently encountered in the forum during his searches. But from what he had just read, it was undeniable that some classes held certain advantages over others. At least the school got one thing right: the classification of classes into combat, support, and lifestyle roles. Now, thanks to the Supers Association forum, Michael also discovered that there were actually 5 types of classes: general class, rare class, special class, hidden class, and unique class. General classes are the most commonly seen classes among awakeners. A large percentage of awakeners possess these classes, which is why they are considered common. These classes are also easily recognizable, as they provide only 2 attribute points per level up. Rare classes are a step above general classes, offering 4 attribute points per level up. These classes can utilize magic or other special abilities. However, a class does not necessarily need to focus on magic to be categorized as rare, like the Berserker class. For example, special classes are somewhat unique and unconventional, which makes them difficult to categorize strictly as either general or rare. For instance, the Chef class provides 3 attribute points per level up, while a Barb class might only grant 2 attribute points, despite both being special classes. The term special refers more to their unconventional nature and niche focus. These classes can be considered rarer than rare classes, but their unique nature makes them versatile in how they are grouped. Hidden classes are inheritance-type classes that very few people can have simultaneously. Similar to special classes, they are rare, but they have an added layer of exclusivity. Hidden classes cannot be naturally awakened but can only be obtained through special means, which makes them particularly elusive. Unique classes are the rarest of all, with only one person able to possess a particular unique class at any given time. There wasn't much information about unique classes on the forum, but Michael didn't think that was actually the case. He read somewhere that the number of awakeners in Aurora was a bit more than 70,000, and he found it hard to believe that no one had any information about unique classes. If they truly knew nothing, it wouldn't even be recognized as a legitimate class type. Michael believed it wasn't that information about unique classes didn't exist on the forum. Rather, it was that his authority level wasn't high enough to access such information. It seems authority level isn't just for show. I should try my best to raise it. Michael caught with a subtle smile on his face. Even though it felt like his head might explode from all this new information, it was as if a fascinating new world had opened up to him, and he couldn't get enough of it. These worlds are truly interesting with a lot to offer. Something else that surprised Michael was that even one's race could influence the benefits they received when leveling up. This revelation opened another world to Michael. From what he read, Each level up as a human race granted 0.2 in all stats, 0.5 in intelligence, and 2 attribute points. Michael wasn't sure if this was low or not, but it seemed significant. Since they say the land of origin is like a game world, I wonder if it's possible to change races, Michael mused. Out of curiosity, he tried searching for information on the possibility in the forum, but like in the cases of gifts and unique classes, he found nothing. As before, this either meant the information didn't exist, or his authority level wasn't high enough. Michael, already used to this, decided to move on. He also read about his class, the Necromancer, which, pleasantly surprising, turned out to be a rare class. Races weren't the only things that provided benefits. As one leveled up, classes did too. Aside from the attribute points they provided based on their grade, certain stats would be boosted depending on the class's specialty. The Necromancer class, for instance, granted 0.1 points to strength and constitution, 0.3 in agility, and 0.5 in intelligence, along with 4 attribute points. Necromancers are basically paper defenses. A punch from a similar level warrior class could probably take out more than half my health, Michael thought immediately. He also began to understand why people in the forum kept emphasizing that power ultimately depended on the Awakener themselves. Classes, race, cultivation, resources that could raise stats themselves, and attribute points. If one utilized these things wisely, even an Awakener with a Tailor class could become deadly. The more Michael read, the more excited he became about the future. He couldn't wait to enter the land of origin, but he knew he couldn't rush in without making proper preparations. Yes, preparations. As an Awakener, he was naturally bound to enter the land of origin, but according to the forum, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows there, especially for new Awakeners. In a Tips for Newbies forum post, which was even starred by the Supers Association, Michael learned that when an Awakener entered the land of origin for the first time, their initial location was random. It could be near an active volcano, a frozen wasteland, or even in a monster's nest. However, there was a balance. According to the post, it would be something a new Awakener should be able to handle theoretically, and Michael didn't like the sound of that, hence his need to prepare. Even the experienced commenters in the post emphasized the importance of preparation. Thanks to the post, Michael also understood why the Supers Association provided such generous funds. It was indeed meant for resources. In the Supers Association platform, aside from the main forum, there was also a store section. Michael saw a myriad of goods there that left him in awe. Refined iron dagger. A price, $230. Refined iron spear. Price, $285. A health potion. Price, $500. Leather pants. Leather shoes. Leather upper body armor. Michael searched for items recommended for newbies and picked the ones he liked. The store had 2 delivery methods, picking up at the Supers Association or opting for home delivery. Michael decisively chose the latter. If he could avoid leaving home, why should he move? Plus, compared to the total cost of the items he bought, the delivery fee was cheaper. Including the delivery fee, Michael spent a total of $4,328. Just like that, a third of the $15,000 the Supers Association had given him was gone. The Supers Association is really scummy. Michael pouted in pain as he connected his account to the Supers Association platform and watched his money disappear. Michael did not regret buying the items, though, even though death in the land of origin wasn't real death. If he could prevent it, why shouldn't he? The penalty for dying was harsh, losing 10% of all stats permanently for each death. The dead Awakener would also be unable to re-enter the land of origin for a while. Perhaps this penalty wouldn't be as severe for new Awakeners, but it was a big deal for the real powerhouses. Imagine having 100 points in all stats and watching 10 permanently disappear. It was a pretty harsh punishment for the top-tier Awakeners. After all, the stronger one was, the harder it was to increase a stat. It wasn't just numbers at that point. A 1-point stat increase for a level 100 Awakener could very well be the equivalent of 10 points for Michael. After placing his order, the Supers Association platform confirmed that his items would be delivered before noon the next day, which Michael was quite satisfied with. It's not too late to enter the land of origin tomorrow anyway. It's even better. I'm too exhausted to do anything now. Michael was also very hungry. He had learned a lot of information, which significantly filled the gaps in his understanding. Anything else he needed to know could be searched for slowly in the future. For now, Michael just wanted to sleep and wait for the new day to arrive before entering the land of origin. He was excited, but he had his priorities straight. Michael put aside his phone and was just about to carry the plate he'd used earlier when a knock came at his door. "Come in," he said reflexively. When he saw who was on the other side, he was surprised. "Aunt." Yes, it was indeed Aunt Mia. Michael had been so engrossed in the Supers Association forum that he hadn't noticed in even entering the house. "Seems like our new Awakener has been busy," Aunt Mia teased as she made her way to Michael's bed and made herself comfortable. "Aunt Mia," Michael said, a little embarrassed by the title, but a happy smile bloomed on his face. He could see a smile on Aunt Mia's face, too, one that was threatening to widen, and hidden within. He could also see that she was proud of him. One must know that both Michaels, from Earth and Aurora, had only experienced true parental love from one person, and that was Aunt Mia. Both had become orphans at a very young age, and Aunt Mia was a mother figure to them, especially to the Michael originally from this world. Though Aunt Mia had a short stature, her blue eyes held the gaze of a mother looking at her child. Michael greeted her respectfully, and he was happy that she was happy. Before he could speak, Aunt Mia beat him to it. "Lily told me about your little adventure today." Michael silently clicked his tongue in annoyance. Perhaps he shouldn't have told Lily anything at all. Now the news he should have delivered himself had come through someone else. But, since it was all family, it didn't really matter. "The amount of money the association gave you is really big, but be careful with it, Michael," Aunt Mia said anxiously. In her eyes, Michael was still a young boy. She had no interest in his money, but she was worried about his spending habits. Though Michael's past record of handling money reassured her, this time the amount was so much larger, and she couldn't help but worry that he might waste it. "And don't mind your silly cousin. There's no need." "Aunt Mia," Michael called out, his tone serious, cutting her off before she could continue. He already knew what she wanted to say, but he didn't want to hear it. His family was his motivation, his drive. Now that he could finally provide for them, how could she refuse? Michael felt dissatisfied. "Aunt Mia, the money the association gave me, well, a big chunk of it is for my well-being, so you don't have to worry about anything." As he spoke, Michael had already pulled out his phone, ready to transfer a portion of the funds to her. "Michael!" Aunt Mia exclaimed anxiously. She didn't entirely believe his words, and feared he was going to inconvenience himself for her. In fact, she was right. But did Michael care? No, he didn't. This was likely a stupid decision, but for once, at least one, Michael wanted to satisfy his selfish desire. And also, if he ended up broke, he could wait for more funds to come in next month, all the while working hard in other areas. Michael wasn't afraid of hard work. Ironically, hard work was what had killed a Michael in this world. The hopeful fool had seen a rumor online that if one trained hard enough to come close to becoming a knight, the chance of awakening would be higher. The original Michael knew this was nonsense, but feeling unlucky and with many responsibilities on his shoulders, he pushed himself too hard. In the end, he died, allowing Michael from Earth to take his place. "It's okay, Aunt Mia. You don't know this, But the Supers Association is still going to give me more resources soon, Michael said, lying with a straight face. It was, of course, impossible. The association wasn't going to do more for him. They weren't his family, and even some families couldn't always provide that much. Are you lying to me? Aunt Mia asked, a little uncertain. You know I'd never lie to you, Aunt Mia, he said, delivering another lie with an innocent face. This time, he felt a slight pang of guilt but didn't let it show. Aunt Mia looked conflicted, her expression reflecting her mixed feelings. Michael noticed her hesitation and knew he had to strike while the iron was hot. Also, since becoming an awakener, I can feel my appetite slowly increasing. We'll need more food at home, Aunt Mia. Michael spoke with a feigned look of seriousness, but just in time, his stomach rumbled, adding authenticity to his words. This convinced Aunt Mia a little. What made her trust his words even more was his status as an awakener. As an awakener, he should be valued by the Federation, right? She thought. Like most adults, she knew of the Federation's admiration for awakeners, though she didn't know that while they valued awakeners, they weren't exactly looking to pamper them. Finally, Aunt Mia chose to believe Michael. Okay, she agreed. Happy, Michael immediately transferred some money to her. Feel free to use it as you like, Aunt Mia. And please, get a few things that Lily enjoys too, he added with confidence, like a rich man. Just then, Aunt Mia's phone buzzed, showing a bank notification of a $5,000 credit. Aunt Mia was speechless and was about to scold Michael when he spoke again. Trust me, Aunt Mia. This money is nothing to me now. Didn't Lily mention that I'll be getting money every month? Aunt Mia nodded reluctantly. If he was telling the truth, her little Michael could indeed afford to spend money like this. However, she decided that, while she'd use some of the money for the family's well-being, she'd save the rest until she could confirm his words. Seeing that he'd successfully convinced his aunt, Michael secretly sighed in relief as a smile appeared on his face. You're hungry, right? I brought some cake and snacks on my way back. Want some? Aunt Mia asked, remembering the thunder that had erupted from his stomach earlier. Yes, I'd love some, Aunt Mia. After confirming, Aunt Mia took the plate Michael had planned to carry out earlier and left the room, returning shortly with some snacks. They shared a few more words before Aunt Mia left, and Michael's room finally fell quiet. Soon, the soft sound of his snores filled the room. Michael slept with a smile on his face that night. Today had been the best day of his life, even if it was just as stressful.